for both the border security and the DACA kids.
I described it as a delicate situation. You said I did a good job by describing it that way, because it is. I mean, we saw something that it was remarkable, that 55-minute live meeting that the president let the camera stay in far longer than the usual thing, which is just like a little photo op, a spray at the top. And we saw a movement there about tone and hopefulness, Senator Cassidy, and I'm wondering if you can get back to that and if you can do so expeditiously.
Only if you just stay laser focused. It is about border security. It is about DACA. It's about keeping illegal drugs and illegal immigrants on the other side of the border and taking care of the DACA kids. If Democrats really care about DACA, they will also focus on the deal before us. Will they give up more border security, which previously they have supported? If we can stay focused on that, I would argue that's the more important thing to focus on, not what was or was not said in the meeting.
The president is said to have made those remarks, whether he did or did not the way that it's being reported right now. He denies so. But he's said to have been very angry because the Senate bill did not come close to what he wanted, and he listed some things. What are your thoughts about that? Chain migration being on the list. He didn't think that that was dealt with in a way that was effective.
Yeah, chain migration is clearly important. Again, border security, taking care of the kids with DACA, all of those are important. You want to avoid getting the deal too comprehensive because then there's too much to oppose. But if you can stay laser focused on the four pillars, if you will, then you can actually come to common ground. I think you can, because again, Democrats supported almost all these things that Republicans are now proposing, and they would get DACA. So I think it's actually a good place to be. Stay laser focused.
Yeah, that's interesting, because when you look at the House version that was put together by Chairman Goodlatte and McCall, McSally, and Labrador, they have broken it out in 4 areas as well. So, I mean, if Republicans can kind of get together on this, maybe you could attract some Democrats. Real quickly, I want to ask you about something. You know, for reporters, we have a term, it's called off the record. That's a little bit different than walking into a private meeting. But I have to think, Senator, and certainly going back and forth with you, there's an etiquette. There's an honor in meeting privately and not discussing what was talked about. And while those things may be incendiary, I want to get your take on that.
I totally agree with you. It undermines trust going forward. Whatever was or was not said, if you disagree with what the fellow or gal says, then you disagree with them publicly then. But to go out and kind of report it is going to undermine trust, not just for this issue, but for future issues. It's just a rule of human contact, whether it's a marriage, a friendship, or a political negotiation.
Oh, you like to break it down and bring it back to the real world, off the hill with those examples. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much, Senator Cassidy.
Thank you.
Well, for more on how the White House next should handle the controversy and what it could mean actually for the president as he goes into the weekend now and comes out on the other side having to get a deal on keeping the government open, what about his base in terms of the midterm elections too? So more to talk about here. Let's bring in former White House Press Secretary Ari Fleischer. Great day to have you along. Your tie matches my dress. Thank you. We'll move on. What should
Thank you,
I gotta smile. What should the White House do? They can't dodge this. They got to take this. So what do they do?
Well, all you can do is say what the president said, and you have to reframe the issue as the way the president did it, and I think you have to bring it back then to the fundamentals of the agreement they're trying to get and work toward the agreement and try to blip through what the president said. That will only work for about 1 minute of the briefing, and the rest of the briefing will be the press banging on the president.
You saw the end of the MLK proclamation and reporters shouting things out, repeating the bad language that purportedly was used in the meeting. How much does it help to have Perdue and others come out and say, we didn't remember hearing it that way, but this was the discussion?
You know, Harris, I'm a little more focused on what does this mean and what does it mean for the president and for getting an agreement to build the wall, to change immigration, and to protect the dreamers, which is what I would like to see happen, all the above. And here's my take on it. You know, Donald Trump is probably the only person who can get an immigration agreement. His predecessors couldn't, he could. It was like Nixon going to China. Along Trump's way to China, he took a detour in the meeting yesterday with the language he used, regardless of what context he used, whether it was about Haiti or Africa. I just don't think it's helpful to getting agreements for presidents to talk like that. I'm all for blunt talk. I'm all for direct talk. And the president has changed the system with his politically incorrect talk, often to the better. But remember when Barack Obama called the Boston Police Department stupid? He spoke in plain English, but he shouldn't have said it. Here, I think it's similar. Donald Trump spoke in plain English, but he shouldn't have said it. It's not helpful to diplomacy. It's not helpful to getting agreements done.
All right, so you are a messaging genius in terms of writing what happens next for a White House. What would you suggest? What would you advise in terms of the wording that the president uses? Does it come with an apology to anyone? Should it?
Well, number one, if I'm Donald Trump, I start tweeting about what Nancy Pelosi said today about crumbs is all that the working people are getting by getting $1,000 and $2,000 bonuses. They should make Nancy Pelosi's statement the biggest issue they can possibly fight over if they can. That won't work at the press briefing because the press would rather go after Donald Trump than Nancy Pelosi. But then, two, bring it back to the substance of the agreement and talking about how at the end of the day you still have to get something done. And what Donald Trump wants to do is build a wall. The Democrats refuse to compromise on building a wall. The president wants to change our immigration system. So it's merit-based. That's on the most Americans support. That's where you have to focus. Today's the day for the White House to try to focus on substance, while the press will focus entirely on process, but deservedly so. This is what happens if presidents say things that cross a line and go too far.
Yeah. Did he miss an opportunity at the MLK proclamation to move this forward?
No, I don't think there's anything the president could have done or said at that.
So no
that
apology,
event,
you think, is
especially since he's
necessary?
sticking to what he said. Donald Trump wouldn't anyway. But what I regret the most, Harris, is there's so much good going on. The bonuses are making profound impacts and improvements in the lives of people,
100 companies, 80 to 100 companies.
Today we find out that more than 2 million people. And we also learned today that China has indeed cracked down on North Korea. Trade with North Korea has dropped by 50%. North Korea is feeling the squeeze. Look, Donald Trump has so many accomplishments that he has made that would not have been done without him being the president. But sometimes he makes himself too hot to handle. And he changes the subject from the good news and the accomplishments to the controversies over his own behavior. And when you're doing that well and you have that many accomplishments, don't you want people to be talking about your accomplishments?
Before I let you go, where I thought you were going with Nancy Pelosi wasn't where you went. I thought you were going to go with the comment about the 5 white guys trying to figure out immigration law. She actually said that, which, by the way, doesn't elevate the conversation. It had nothing to do with the remarks by the president. She said that at a public event, thinking that that was okay.
Yeah, I think that's another issue where Nancy Pelosi has shown just how out of touch she is. She doesn't see people
Steny
for their
Hoyer
ideas
didn't
first.
appreciate
She sees
it.
people for the color of their skin first. But racial politics never works when Republicans talk about it. The press always turns against Republicans on those issues. They'll take Nancy Pelosi's side on that.
Ari Fleischer, thank you very much. Great to see you and to get your professional perspective on this. Very helpful. Thank you. President Trump is also making headlines for his Wall Street Journal interview, where he described his relationship with North Korea's dictator. You just heard Ari talking about North Korea. He slams the FBI agent caught texting about him and explains how Mexico could pay for the border wall. We have one of those reporters who was in the room, interviewed him. Next. Stay close.
I will build a great, great wall on our southern border, and I will have Mexico pay for that wall.
President Trump making headlines today for his interview with the Wall Street Journal. During that sit-down, the president said he and North Korea leader Kim Jong-un probably have a very good relationship. The president suggested perhaps they may have even spoken. He also weighed in on potential bias at the FBI, saying text messages between officials involved in the special counsel's Russia investigation amounted to treason. And he insisted Mexico could pay for the border wall indirectly through NAFTA renegotiations. One of the reporters who interviewed the president is with me now, Luis Rednovsky, White House reporter for the Wall Street Journal. So, Luis, he hit a lot of important news points yesterday. Talk to me.
Well, we did cover a lot of ground. Perhaps the top line for many people was the revelation from the president that he believes he has a very good relationship with Kim Jong-un, that he was happy to suspend military exercises on the Korean Peninsula until after the Olympic Games was completed, saying it would be inappropriate to have carried them out. He didn't say whether the two men had been in contact, but he left open the possibility that they had been. And when we asked him, whether the the Twitter messages in which he's traded tough talk with the North Korean leader suggested that perhaps they didn't have a very good relationship, he said, well, I'm flexible. And that in many ways, his relationships with 20 or 30 examples of people reflected that he could be best friends with somebody that he'd be having very tough talk with only a few days earlier.
Sure. No, and it's an important point, too, because with the South and the North meeting recently and saying that there could be future talks, there has been kind of this hanging question mark about how involved we might get in terms of even sitting down and talking. So the president getting on the record about a relationship potentially being more positive than one would think from the tweets that they both have sent out is news.
Certainly. We also asked the president if he felt in any way boxed out, or as if South Korea was trying to drive a wedge, or North Korea was trying to drive a wedge that would cut the U.S. out of the talks. And the president was very clear he did not see that being the case. He said if anyone was a master of wedging in situations, it was him, and that he believed that he would be playing a very valuable role going forward in this. But certainly that right now the relationship is very good.
And we want to remind everybody, because I'm sure they can hear the sirens near you, it is live television, and obviously you're standing outside the White House, so we're going to hear what's going on around you. The president also weighed in on the potential bias at the FBI. What did he tell you?
He did. This came up somewhat unprompted, but he was. We were asking about the Russia investigation, and he had some quite significant complaints about one of the FBI agents who had at some point been involved in the investigation, although he was later let go by Special Counsel Robert Mueller because of text messages in which he had referred to the potential of an investigation against President Trump being used as an insurance policy in some way to guarantee the outcome of the election. Now, this is Mr. Trump's interpretation of the tweets, of course, but the text messages, I apologize. But he felt that they amounted to treason and signaled that he interpreted that as part of this investigation being a broader witch hunt against him.
You know, when you mention the word treason and the book that came out, Fire and Fury, last week, and Steve Bannon, his former White House chief strategist, whom he fired, the president did, being quoted so heavily in that book and now lawyered up and getting ready to talk to House Intel. Did he talk at all about Steve Bannon in this? And did you ask him about him?
He did, and we did. The full transcript is on WSJ.com, and there's plenty of news in there for people who want to read it in full. What they will see is that he was very angry about what had happened with Steve Bannon, but also that there again he explained that there was a certain amount of flexibility, that he didn't know what the word permanent meant in reference to whether his break with Steve Bannon was indeed permanent.
Really? Okay.
Really.
That's interesting.
That came amid some very tough talk in which he said that Steve Bannon did not necessarily play a key role in his election victory,
Sure.
but again, that there was room for a possible coming together again.
Oh, that's very interesting, because you know what Steve Bannon did. He threw some fuel on the fire this week and said the president is going to need him again in the future. So when you talk about even a little bit of daylight, a crack in the door, the window, whatever, with the president, that's news as well. I'm trying to, just to hit those points that are new with your interview. And you said the full transcript is at WSJ.com, so people can read about it. But I want to just kind of get the texture from the president when you ask about paying for the wall and how Mexico might actually play an indirect role.
Right. He said that there are many ways to get Mexico to pay for the wall. We asked for an example, and he said one was through NAFTA negotiations. That essentially, if a hard deal was won in NAFTA negotiations, and he said that if a hard deal that was favorable to the United States wasn't won, he was willing to walk away from the agreement altogether. But if a hard deal was won and Mexico ended up paying the United States in some way, he could divert that money, use it for the wall, and essentially say that as a result, indirectly, Mexico was paying for this. Now, he also said that he didn't believe that the wall, and he said this before a little bit, didn't have to be 2,100 miles long, the entire length of the border. That the wall probably needed to be relatively small physically because of other natural barriers that he saw in the region. And that was also in response to a question about how much money it would take to actually build the wall as part of the DACA deal that's still being hammered out.
Yeah, okay, so the senators handed the president yesterday, which is where the reporting is that his incendiary remarks were made because he was angry about what he saw before him. The Senate bill in this immigration bill really didn't have much cash for the wall. It fell a lot of dollars short. So I'm curious, the timing of your interview, was it already known that the Senate immigration bill was falling short and that dollars would be needed?
We asked about the Senate bill, the Senate deal. He said that at the time he was meeting with us, he hadn't seen it yet, but he was very clear about what he wanted to see from it. He was very much in support of a permanent fix on DACA. He said that he had a lot of heart for the 800,000 DACA beneficiaries, that he believed that they were hardworking and that the country needed workers. That was something of a surprise to some people, and that he believed his base was behind him in securing such a permanent fix. What he wanted in return was an end to the visa lottery. He was very explicit about that, and some reduction in family-based immigration as well. He had some harsh words to say about that, too.
Well, and we have heard so much in detail now about what's in it and his response as well. Louise Rednofsky with the Wall Street Journal, thank you very much. We appreciate you sharing, opening up your reporter's notebook to tell us what was in it. Thank you.
Of course.
We will know shortly if President Trump will reimpose sanctions against Iran. The president also faces another deadline on whether to recertify the Iran nuclear deal. Could he be laying the groundwork to withdraw completely from that agreement? And what would be the fallout of that? We'll break it down, the pros, the cons, with Israel's former ambassador to the United Nations. Stay close. It is official, a Fox News alert now, a big announcement from the Trump administration on Iran. The State Department just announced the United States will continue to waive the sanctions on Iran, including the nuclear deal, as the administration plots its next moves. However, the U.S. is also issuing new sanctions on some non-nuclear entities that won't affect the overall agreement that is in place. Rich Edson is live at the State Department. So we knew some of this is coming. Break it down for us, Rich.
Right, and an entire new announcement on top of that, Harris. The U.S. is going to stay in the Iran nuclear deal for now, according to White House senior administration officials. But the president says this is the last time he's going to waive these sanctions against Iran unless European governments agree to make changes to the Iran nuclear deal. So this puts the Iran nuclear deal on a clock that takes us to about maybe May or June, because the president has to certify these every 100 or 120, 180 days. Now there will have to be negotiations in order to keep the United States in the Iran nuclear agreement. On top of that, the United States, separate from the Iran nuclear agreement, is going to certify more than a dozen senior Iranian entities for an entirely different group of behavior. This is according to Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary. He says, quote, "We are targeting the Iranian regime, including the head of Iran's judiciary, for its appalling mistreatment of its citizens, including those imprisoned solely for exercising their right to freedom of peaceful assembly, and for censoring its own people as they stand up in protest against their government." Senior administration officials say they want to see from the European governments and from Congress, they want to demand that Iran allow immediate inspections, anytime, anywhere inspections, has to ensure that Iran won't come anywhere near a nuclear weapon, no sunset clause, so this agreement would stay in place in perpetuity, and they're now targeting the top of the regime with these different sanctions. European governments have said they like the deal as is. They want to keep this intact. The Trump administration is saying this is the last time we're going to waive these sanctions and stay in the deal. You guys have to agree to change a different agreement here, change your approach to Iran, or we're out.
Wow, that is actually a big deal, because
Yes.
in terms of trying to get those countries to come on board and make some changes, May is right around the corner. What are the changes specifically, maybe one or two, that you know of that he's expecting these European nations to do?
This would be a separate agreement, according to senior administration officials, a follow-on deal just to be negotiated with the European countries. That's the EU, Britain, Germany, and France. And what they're looking to do is, this deal sunsets after several years. The Trump administration wants to make sure that this agreement lasts, that Iran has to submit to these inspections and do all that they're supposed to do under the Iran nuclear agreement beyond that decade-long sunset clause. They also want to increase certain aspects to the agreement that allow the United States and international body really to look and make sure and inspect Iran to make sure that they're not producing nuclear weapons.
It will be interesting to see if they can toughen those inspections, because part of the criticism has been those inspections are not really very open. They're not transparent. We need more in that. Thank you very much. We appreciate your reporting. Let's go now to my next guest, Dan Gillerman, former Israeli ambassador to the United Nations and Fox News contributor. Ambassador, as you're hearing this is different. This president is walking out a completely different line now with Iran. Last time he's going to recertify, get it together, European nations. Your thoughts?
Well, Harris, I think this is very good news. I really do. And I think this is just another example of this president saying America first. And in this case, America is the first to recognize and to unveil the mask which this evil, vicious Iranian regime is wearing, and actually try and get the other signatories to this very bad agreement, Britain, France, Germany, China, and Russia, to realize that this agreement must be amended, must be strengthened. Otherwise, the United States would walk away from it, and I think in that case, the agreement won't be worth very much. So I think this is a very bold step. I think it is also a step which is signaling to Iran that the United States is saying enough is enough. It is also addressing Iran's terror regime. Iran is the main harborer, perpetrator, financer, and executor of terror around the world. It spread its bloody tentacles in the form of its proxies, Hamas and Hezbollah in our region, but all over the world. And, I think everybody realizes that, this terror regime, which is already killing people and terrorizing them all over the world, what they're doing now is just a preview, soon to be seen in a theater near you if this country becomes nuclear. So I think what the president has announced today is very good news. And as I said, it's America first. I hope others will follow.
It's so interesting to hear you put it that way, because when it's talked about, many people will say America first means putting our policies and things that sort of feed into our vision of the world, our foreign policy. But what you're saying is America first in terms of leading, stepping out and saying, we're going to walk away from this deal. You've got till May or so to get it together to those countries, the EU, Germany, Britain, and France, with a follow-on deal, with certain things as far as inspections and so forth. That's really an interesting and different take on America first that I hear you saying about this. This mentions the protesters, and I want to get your thought on the people on the street, not the government of Iran, but the protesters and how they play a role in this. Oh, I think we lost him. And it is a tough thing, too, because, we've had a little bit of a delay, so we're working on that. But I think we've got you back. Ambassador?
No,
No, we don't.
Yes. Hi,
right,
Harris. I didn't realize. I heard. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm with you. I just heard the program, and I thought you were showing something I had to react to. I'm sorry. But, when we talk about the Iranian people, it is actually a very, very interesting thing, because Iran is a very young country. 50% of Iranians were born long after the Shah. Half of Iran is under 20 years old. 60% of all university students in Iran are women. It is an intelligent and very clever country. And I think that most of the people in Iran, as we've seen in the demonstrations just recently, are fed up with the ayatollahs and the mullahs. They are fed up with this dictatorship and autocratic regime. And I think Iran is ripe for a grassroots revolution. The only problem is we have two clocks ticking. We have the Iranian people's clock and we have the nuclear clock. And if Iran becomes nuclear before the people overthrow this evil regime, then we're all going to live in a horrible, horrible world. And as I said before, when I say America first, I know America first means looking after America's interests, being especially economic, but also in other fields. But I think in this case, what I meant when I said America first is America taking the lead. Right. America being the first one to call a spade, and America saying to its other partners, come along with us, let's make this a better deal. Otherwise, we're going to walk away from it. And I think that's a very, very important warning.
Ambassador Dan Gillerman, you have been along my side for some of the big breaking news that affects your nation, ours, and the rest of the world. I appreciate your perspective on this. Thank you. Well, the big controversy over exactly what the president said in that private meeting on immigration, we're asking how this might play with his base and the rest of the American people. Our power panel next.
Okay.
Story, the war of words rocking Washington. Let's bring in our power panel now. Michael Tobman served as a senior aide to Democratic leader Senator Chuck Schumer. And back from Outnumbered, Fox News contributor Rachel Campos Duffy. So I want to go to you first, Rachel, just in terms of how this plays with the base.
So I think that, first of all, sometimes it's really good to be an unfiltered non-politician. And in this case, some bad things can happen when you're an unfiltered non-politician, and this is one of them. I think his base is going to forgive him. They voted for somebody who's in politics. I personally, I'm a minority. I don't think the president is a racist. I think the president is just unfiltered, says things in ways that most politicians would never say them. And frankly, my interpretation of what he said was that he thought those countries and their governments were crappy, for lack of a, I don't want to use that word that they use.
You don't want to use that word.
I don't want to use that word, and not the people. And I also think he was trying to make a statement about America selecting immigrants to meet our skills and our needs in the country. And maybe in his opinion, he thought that they shouldn't. It picks from some of those countries. That said, can I just say one last thing?
Yes.
Mia Love, first Republican female Haitian American. Her parents came here, never got a dime from the government, raised a fine young woman who is now a congresswoman in the House of Representatives. Clearly, the kind of immigrants we do want.
Oh, and she's speaking out against the remarks by the president.
Of course.
You know, the challenging thing for the White House, Michael, is that this feeds into the narrative that Democrats have been, looking at all along, kind of stoking all along as the president makes remarks.
You have a very generous heart. I wouldn't have been quite as forgiving on this. Look, I, as usual, fall somewhere in the middle on this. I don't know that vulgarity and sort of harsh and hateful language plays to any base, but the ideas behind it and his view of the world, I think is hurtful, and I hope people don't respond to it. All of that being said, yes, the president is a non-politician and is a candidate, and in first year in his administration, he certainly proved again and again he has the temperament to be unfiltered that way. I just wish, forget that it's something that shouldn't have been said, and let's assume it was said. It's something he shouldn't have been thinking, because it reveals a view of the world that I think isn't
I agree,
healthy.
and I would never speak that way myself, but isn't it fair for the President of the United States to assume he's in a private meeting? Again, not anything I would say, but in this case, I look at what Dick Durbin, and I'm assuming it's probably Dick Durbin who released that. I saw the interview with him. When I look at that, I go, Dick Durbin cares more about politics and taking down our president, and by that I mean he is our president and the prestige of this country. He cares more about taking him down than he cares about the prestige of this country and about our allies' feelings being hurt.
All right, I want to give Michael a chance to respond to this, because this was a private meeting, and you take something that the president says or anybody in that room outside of the context, and it becomes political.
Of course.
Why do this as Democrats?
I think as I've said, if three people want to keep a secret, two of them have to be dead. It just simply doesn't. It doesn't happen.
You don't think that it's possible for
I
them
don't
to
think
stay
it's possible,
private?
but the easiest way to avoid this controversy is don't say it. There are other ways to say it. Don't say what you said. And then what people leak is we're having problems with our neighbors in the hemisphere. There's extreme poverty. If you don't say it, it's.
Well, what about not always being so offended?
Of course, people.
When Joe Biden said that Obama was the first clean African-American presidential candidate, Obama said, I'm not offended, but he said those comments are historically inaccurate.
I think we should stay focused on the immediate issue in front of us.
Of course, you want to stay focused on that, but when you excuse when a Democrat says it.
I'm not excusing anything. What I'm saying is the easiest way to avoid this and not have it leak is don't say it. But
well,
to say not leak is to say.
And how about not repeat
Maybe they should have it recorded in the future. That 55-minute long immigration meeting that we as a nation got to see that was amazing and epic. Maybe that's how it should be. People can sometimes dial up different angels. They're better angels, I guess, when the cameras are on. So 100%. For the president to say that he understands the nature of a private meeting, I'm just asking if Democrats understood the nature of a private meeting. We'll move on. But you stay right where you are, because we're going to talk more. The top Democrat on the House Intel Committee reportedly is calling for dozens of additional witnesses in the ongoing Russia investigation. Steve Bannon, Corey Lewandowski are ready, set to testify, with Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump on the wish list. Are Democrats overreaching? Stay close.